Well, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it, Bailey. I thought I was going to come here today and teach, but I've learned so much. I already have a couple pages of notes. I don't know how I'm going to follow Vinny. This is going to be tough to follow Vinny. So, a little bit quickly about myself. You guys may recognize me. I owned the mulch yard that was always on fire, so you may have recognized me from that. I know a couple of you came up and recognized me, but I sold that business. So after I sold, I became a business broker about 2.5 years ago now. I've sold as a business broker. I've sold 27 businesses in the last 24 months. I just won some awards with number one co-broker, which is I'm really proud of. I've sat on both sides of the table. I have been in you guys' shoes. I've always been the one signing the front of the paycheck, right? And figuring out how to finagle and everything. So, today it's really not about, sell your business. It's how to build value a year from now, 5 years from now, or 20 years from now. I'm going to have to switch hands here, I guess, to figure out how to do this thing. So I apologize. I'm going to be looking down on you because I don't have bifocals. All right. So I had a site work company at one time that I had 44 employees. I bought a college hunk calling junk franchise, sold it. I had a dumpster company that I scaled and then sold to a competitor. And then, as I mentioned, I had the mulch yard. So I've lived it. Most owners know their revenues, but they don't know their value. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So raise your hand if you guys know what your house is worth. You guys know what your house is worth, right? Okay. But how many of you really know what your business is worth? Right. I've been in your shoes. I had that same issue when I owned my business. If someone offered you a fair price for your business tomorrow, how would you know that it was a fair price? Right? Revenue isn't necessarily value. Profit isn't always the end result of the value. But value is basically what the buyer is willing to pay for your business. So that's what we have to figure out for you. The business asset is typically your largest asset. For most of us, so that you build this business over a period of time, it can be worth more than your home is worth. Any of your other assets. So waiting to understand what the value of your business could really become an expensive lesson to learn. So speaking of lessons to learn, I'll give you a little bit what happened to me. So it was 2005. I had a site work company. We had 44 employees. We were doing $13 million a year in revenue. I actually had a business broker come to me and said, I got a buyer for your business. I said, no. I went there and talked to them, and they said I had to do these financials and print this tax return. And, it's like, the world's not going to end. We're on, everybody lived in 2005, right? No one thought that was going to change, right? So I hear some laughing because you all know where this story is leading. But even before what everybody else had, I had an even bigger problem. I had a customer concentration problem. Okay, so customer concentration means that I had one customer that was 50% of my revenue. So 2005, I was doing 13 million. On my honeymoon, I got fired by first home builders. Okay, the following year we were down to 6 million. The following year, was when the Depression started, because we got the Depression because there was no lots to clear. There was nothing, okay? So life happens, and it isn't always about, things that happen in your life. There's customer concentration, there's risks in your business, there's, the economy, so everything happened, at one time. So that was a hard lesson with that. So, and the thing was that we didn't, it wasn't that we built a bad business. We waited too long, right? We made decisions of letting others control our business by allowing them to have that high risk, of customer concentration. So the best time to prepare for the exit is before you need one, right? And sometimes it is that the market changes, not just your life changes. So when is the difference, right? The difference between a planned exit and a forced exit. And by the way, mine wasn't forced. We just went out of business, right? So that was the forced exit. But planned exit, you have the time to prepare, and that's one of the things I congratulate you guys for being here today. Because exit strategy is business strategy, right? So it's not that a lot of you said that you don't want to sell, and that's great. But there's going to be a time that you want to get the value out of your business, right? So time to prepare is a planned exit. When you have a planned exit, you get better buyers. Better buyers mean more money in your pocket, a better deal. You get to take better care of your employees at the exit. The terms are better. You decide, when and what. And of course, a higher dollar amount. Forced exits, and I'll share a couple scenarios as we go through, but forced exits, you have a very limited amount of time to get to the market to sell. So you have fewer buyers who are willing to move faster. Well, in order for them to move faster, they're going to write a smaller check. They're not going to give you the terms. They're going to want seller financing. They're going to want all these different things for you to stay on, and less money is going to end up, in your pocket at the end of the day. So buyers of businesses are just like anything else. They need a return on their investment. And the buyers are getting. The buyers of businesses, you get all these Cody Sanchez and everything else, they're becoming more educated. They're becoming more demanding. They're expecting a lot more from sellers. So the 5 Ds, this is what we say when, the forced, sometimes it's not on you. Death, disability, divorce, disagreement, distress. So I had a husband and wife came to me about a year and a half ago, and the husband had already fallen, hit his head, and but they were still doing some business. Their employees were still in place. I valued their business. I told them it's worth about $1.5 million. They decided not to go to market. They weren't ready. Okay? The husband had some neurological problems. He wasn't able to still maintain in that same position. They decided not to go to market. Ended up, a few months later, the husband passed away. So now the wife, who really wasn't the one running the business, who didn't have, the deep skills that the husband has, is now running the business by herself. So she called me up, Denise, I want to sell the business. I said, okay, well, we got to look at the numbers now. What's going on today? By by the time, she called me, now the business is down to $1 million in value. We went to market. Within a week or two, I had multiple offers, full price offers. We're gonna go. So I'm like, all right, thank God we saved it in time. She calls me after she's just about to sign one of the offers, and she says, I went this weekend with my daughter. Daughter's not in the business, but the daughter made her feel guilty that she was going to sell her dad's legacy. Daughter never worked in the business, but all of a sudden she wanted an opinion on for her mom's future. We take it off the market. We wait. So a few months go by. Now she's lost one of her key employees. She's lost a couple of her key customers. We're now under contract I found a strategic buyer, somebody that was already in the business, coming from New York. $700,000. Seller finance. Owner has to stay a year on, okay? That all happened in like a year and a half. This was not a lot of time, right? None of that was anticipated. None of it was expected. And that's the thing. So preparing for an exit needs to be your number one priority, even when you're not planning on exiting, okay? And so a profitable business doesn't always necessarily mean that it's a sellable business, okay? So there's a lot of things that go into making sure, and everybody here today is really honed in on a couple of these things, right? So owner dependence. I've had so many businesses come to me, and even sometimes from the outside, you don't realize how much that owner is involved until we get into the meeting with the buyer and seller. After they're interested, we sit down on the buyer and seller, and all of a sudden the seller's telling the buyer, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm part of this, I'm part of that. Wait a second, are you staying afterwards? Because usually you give me the keys and you get your money and you go. So buyers don't want to hear that. They want to hear, hey, John, my manager, does this. Gloria, my bookkeeper, does that. And those are the things. So weak financials. And weak financials can mean a lot of different things. It doesn't always mean, obviously the obvious ones, right? Making sure that you have tax returns, making sure that your financials are up to date. But how many of you guys have looked at your balance sheet to see that those items on your balance sheet are accurate? How many of you looked at your P&L to really understand how to read the P&L? I'm guilty of that. I didn't realize how to do it until all of a sudden my CFO one day walked out, and I had to figure out how to read that all of a sudden, So we've all been there, but as you get closer to an exit, weak financials also include what we call add backs. In our industry, meaning how much are you doing, how much, I like to call it like, are you treating your business like it's a personal ATM? So, we highly suggest as you get closer, just take the paycheck and then write, the Amazon expenses and the boat, but it's really hard for me when I'm in the middle, of due diligence of explaining, a $15,000 boat motor for, a restaurant, that I'm selling, right, or whatever it is, and people don't like that, So clean financials. Customer concentration, we spoke of that. Buyers really want to see less than 5%. There's a lot of different ways to kind of combat that. You don't necessarily want to fire your customers. You just need more customers. So you reduce the risk. Employee risk. I think Vinny gave a excellent explanation about how to de-risk that. just on an emotional basis. When he was doing that analysis, the rating your employees, I've caught myself for the last couple of weeks complaining about one of my agents because, I have a couple of agents now, and, oh, she's not this or that. And then that's why I said I was surprised that I rated her as a 10 because she wants it. It's my fault that I'm not training her and getting her the tools that she needs, So I need to improve that. I need to do that. And there's saying that says you build your employees up, give them the education and the tools so they can leave, but you pay them enough where they don't want to leave, and you take care of them enough where they don't want to leave. Inconsistent cash flow. So that's a big one. You can say, oh, I had a great year, or I had this, but then the next year, you take your eye off the ball and you have these ups and downs, Buyers don't like that. So, be excuse me, aware of that. So, revenue versus predictable revenue. And predictable revenue is, basically means you got to get systems in place that allow you to create the predictable revenue. You go into a room and the buyers are like, well, how did you get that? Well, I had this one guy or that one. No, that's great, and that got you going, but you got to be consistent, consistency, stability, and predictable revenue. So, think to yourself, is my business set up where I'm always worried where I'm going to get the next lead, where am I going to get the next sale, or do I have systems and processes in place that's handling that for me? So, marketing itself isn't an expense. I always said in business is sales and cash flow solves all problems. The only way to get sales and cash flow is to get marketing, right? So you got to look at it as making the investment. And so once you get into the marketing, are you, obviously you need the leads, but are you tracking them through the CRM? Are you asking for reviews? Are you creating the databases? Are you doing the follow-ups? And I know Bailey and his team is going to talk a lot more about that, but that really is the key. Is I see, and we've all had it. We call companies and we say, hey, we want a quote. We never hear from them again. I was at my dad's house the other day, and he said, I called the fence guy out, and he said it took the guy 3 hours to gave him a quote, because he said that he came from a half hour away, half hour back, was there for 2 hours. That was 3 weeks ago. The fence guy has not followed up with my dad, and my dad's a ready, willing, and able buyer right now, So how many times has that happened? How many, so you got to have systems in place, because everyone gets busy. Life happens, but you have to have your team. Who's going to, I think Bailey said, who's going to own that lead? Who's going to follow up? What's the system that's in place? That's really key. So in the business world, there's SDE and EBITDA. So you guys have probably heard this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. If you want to take a picture, go ahead. Different size businesses have SDE, which is seller discretionary earnings. It's what you keep in your pocket. EBITDA is kind of the same thing. It just usually doesn't count your wage. But different buyers are going to look at your business differently based on the type of buyer they are. Okay. Whoops, I did something wrong here.
Denise, I was messing with it back here. You trying to go to the next slide?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we touch base on that for a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely.
Close that down. Can you give me an example of a SDE and EBITDA?
So SDE is your salary. So as the owner, your salary, that's number one. Or distribution. If you're not taking a salary, if you're an S corp, what the distribution that you take at the end of the year or quarterly, the profit of the business. But it's more than that. We add back in your health insurance that you may pay for. We add, maybe you have a 401k. Maybe you have a vehicle, your wife's vehicle, your husband's vehicle, who may not be necessary for the business. Maybe you put your daughter on payroll. That's a non-working, daughter. That's an add back. Everything that the next buyer would not have the expense for, they, I say everything, but it depends on who the buyer is if they're going to take that as an add back to the clean financials, right? So you want to be careful of having too many crazy stuff in there, especially when you get ready to go to market, because believe me, I don't want to be talking to the SBA lender explaining why you put a $15,000 motor in a boat for a restaurant, right? They're going to be like, okay, well, you screwed the government, excuse my language, but you're not going to, then I'm not going to help you then with the value of your business, right? So there's certain things that, okay, well, you did it, but we're not going to add it back. So
Also something on that too is that $15,000 that you just trying to write off. Which don't get me wrong, I've done that in my business too. But what is your multiple on that so that 15,000 times 4 is if your business is valued at a 4 times multiple is that's 15,000 times 4 that you just lost off your sale price.
correct. It's a great point. So what I tell my sellers is, listen, you wrote off this $15,000 expense, but let's just assume for argument's sake, it's a dollar. Okay, it's easier to understand if we put it in the dollar sense. So you did not pay tax on that dollar, right? So for that dollar of income, you would have had to pay 35 cents, right? Because everyone, let's just say people are in the 35% tax bracket. So you would have had to pay IRS 35 cents for that $1. I could have made it. I can make you $3 to $4 or $5 depending on that business. Had you not done that, so had you just not paid it out of the business, right? So don't try to cheat by saving that 35 cents because you're losing $3 to $4 to $5 down the road by just having clean financials.
If you're profitable and you want to take 15K out to buy a boat, like heck yeah, do it. But do it through distribution, so then it's clean financials. So then you can get that $60,000 because 15 times 4, you get yourself an extra $60,000. And look at the last 3 years. So if you're looking at it selling over the next 3 years, these are things to start thinking about.
Exactly. No, 100%. When you go online, you'll see EBITDA. You'll hear that word, EBITDA. Seller SDE and EBITDA is very, very similar. If you're a Main Street business, buyers are going to ask you what's your SDE. Private equity guys are going to talk to you about your EBITDA. The major difference is they're not going to add your personal salary back because they need someone running the business versus a private individual buying your business is going to have that salary. That's what they're buying. They're buying themselves that job. But I just had a kitchen and bath restaurant. And we had 2 different buyers, and they're valuing it 2 different ways, same exact business, because one of them is more of a private equity looking to see, okay, what am I going to need to replace? I'm going to have to replace the owner. And then another guy's looking at it is, okay, this is going to be my livelihood in the future. This is, income for my family.
How many years should your books be clean? Like how far back are you looking? How many years?
At minimum of 3 years, minimum of 3 years, yeah. It's good practice no matter what, right? You know, it's the right thing to do. But there are certain things that, as business owners, that is one of the benefits, not the boat motor, you know, but you go to dinner with your spouse. Well, my husband and I are business together. I'm talking about, you know, business every meal, you know. And so, you know, there's certain things like that that it's one of your benefits. So. Whoops. Okay. So the 3 things that you guys can do today is know your value, reduce your owner dependence, and build predictable revenue. So how do you know your value? Obviously, there's companies that do valuations. I do valuations, goal setting, benchmarking, owner dependence. You know, start delegating, start documenting, get your management team in place, involve them more about what the goals of the business is. Building predictable revenue. You know, creating reoccurring customers. Reoccurring customers is, you know, we were just talking about multiples. So you could take the same company. If you had no reoccurring customers, you might be only at a 2-time multiple. You start creating your reoccurring customer base, all of a sudden that same exact business doing the same amount of money could all of a sudden be a 4-time multiple or 5-time multiple. And to explain the multiples, it basically, you know, for every dollar of profit, you're timesing that by that multiple, okay? So if you have $100,000 worth of profit, a 3-time multiple means you have a $300,000 business, okay? And so reoccurring customers, the marketing systems to get you to that, repeat customers, customer retention. You know, this is something that Bailey and Prospect know very well, so they can help you out with that. So, you know, why do some businesses sell for higher multiples? We talked on, you know, some of these financials, but again, sales and revenue is the driver. So, but it's not just the revenues. You have to have the system in place. So if you have a business A with no marketing system, you know, you're doing marketing, but you have no system in place, versus you have another company, you know, another business that it has transferable growth. Which one do you think is worth more? You know, it's just it's something that you guys got to think about, right? So buyers, they buy certainty. They want predictable. They want stability. They want to know what's coming down the road. So what they love is recurring revenue, diversified customers, management and team, clean financials, and predictable lead generation. All of these items reduce the risk of the company. So buyers value your business based on how risky it is. And a lot of these things, you don't have to do all this by yourself. There's people out there to help you through this. So a lot of the SBA buyers, okay, so what they're buying, we talked about SDE. When they buy your business, okay, say they're going to buy a business that's worth $500,000, they're not going to just write a check sometimes, right? They're going to go finance that. So in order to then still make a living, they're going to have debt service. They're going to have to pay themselves a salary, and they're going to want a margin of safety. Basically, they want to hedge their bet. And so if the cash flow can't support the debt service, the owner's lifestyle, and a little bit of rolling the dice there, the business becomes sometimes impossible to finance, therefore impossible to sell. So the most valuable asset isn't really what you think. When we had our horticulture yard, we had $5 million worth of grinders and screeners and everything else. That's not always what the buyers are looking at. They're looking at, what is the CRM? Where's the customers? Can we track them? Do you have the system in place? Are we able to pull from those customers, get them to do the reviews, the lead generation systems, processes, the follow-up? Do you have these systems in place? Those are going to be the questions when they sit down at the table with you and you go into a buyer-seller meeting, that they're going to look you in the eye and say, how are you doing this? What are you doing? Are you tracking this? And you need to have the answers. And again, all of this is, whether you're selling or not, you need, this, it doesn't matter if you sell or not. The exit strategy is business strategy. That's what you got to look at this. So why professional advisors matter. So when you do get to that point and you are ready, and even all the way through this, you guys need to have good CPAs to make sure your financials are clean, a good attorney that you can always dial up, and financial advisor. You should be working on your personal financials as well. Even though this is your biggest asset, keep track of what's going on in your personal life with your personal financials. And of course, you're a marketing partner. Marketing. Sales and cash flow solves all your problems, or most of them. Okay, can't reiterate that enough. So there, if you guys want a free business valuation, give me a shout. I will offer that to you guys as a courtesy. If you also, you can take an exit readiness assessment to see how ready you are to go to market. My website is pretty easy. It's denisesellsbusinesses.com. And my email is denise@denisesellsbusinesses.com. My phone number's up there. Give me a ring. I love to help people in the community and to educate them. I didn't come here today to get you guys to sell your business. I got you to think about how you can create the value in your business.